Now, finally, on the issue of Mr Djokovic, rules are rules, and there are no special cases. Rules are rules. It's what I said to you yesterday. That's the policy of the government and has been our government's strong border protection policies, and particularly in relation to the pandemic, that has ensured that Australia has one of the lowest death rates from COVID anywhere in the world. We were one of the first countries to move on shutting our borders. We were criticised at the time, but it was the right decision. And we have maintained those important border controls over the entire period of the pandemic. We have tightened them even further on occasion. Again, we were criticised for doing that, but it was the right decision. And we will continue to make the right decisions when it comes to securing Australia's borders in relation to this pandemic. Our government has strong form when it comes to securing our borders. I don't think anybody doubts that, and they know that I, both as Prime Minister Treasurer and particularly as Minister of Immigration and Border Protection, have a very strong view on this. And I want to thank the Australian Border Force officers for doing their job, implementing the government's policy. And the ABF has done their job. Entry with a visa requires double vaccination or a medical exemption. I'm advised that such an exemption was not in place, and as a result, he is subject to the same rule as anyone else. I also want to stress that ultimately, this is the responsibility of the traveller. It is for the traveller to be able to assert and back up their ability to come into the country consistent with our laws. So they'll take advice from many places. No advice was provided by the Commonwealth Government, I underscore, but they will take advice, but it's up to them at the end of the day. And if they don't comply with the rules, then the Australian Border Force will do their job, and they have done their job. This is nothing about any one individual. It is simply a matter of following the rules. And so those processes will take their course over the next few hours, and that event will play out as it should. Happy to take questions.
First of all, the logistics of this at a federal level. Novak Djokovic was able to get on a plane, which means that he had a visa. Yeah. And he had to have this exemption, as I understand it, registered with Services Australia. Can you just explain to us how it was that he was able to actually travel here? And does that mean that these bits of paperwork aren't actually processed before somebody boards a plane?
No. The way it works is this. People try to run the border all the time, by the way. You know, people come with a visa but may not satisfy other requirements for entry. And people are put on planes and turned back all the time. Anybody who's watched the Border Patrol shows will understand that. This is not an irregular thing to happen if someone is put on a plane and told to return to their country, even if they may have come with a valid visa. A visa is one issue, but you have to have a double vaccination, because that's the country's rule for entry into the country, and that is assessed at the border. And we don't have Border Force officers in every airport around the country. And he provided information to the airline to allow his entry onto the plane. But people get on that plane. That is not an assurance that they'll be able to come through Australia's border at the other side. It wasn't a problem necessarily with the visa. There are many visas granted. And if you have a visa and you're double vaccinated, well, you're very, very welcome to come. And I think what this says to everybody in Australia, people are welcome in Australia. But if you're not double vaccinated and you're not an Australian resident or citizen, well, you can't come. And many countries have those rules around the world, and we have them, and they've been very important for securing Australia during the course of this pandemic. And so it is on them to have the proof to show why they wouldn't have to be vaccinated. Now, he was unable to furnish that proof to the Border Force officers at the airport last night, and they're the rules. And it happens on many occasions, and that's what's now happened.
The argy-bargy at the airport, which seemed to be about sort of a group visas that have been processed somehow, and this suggestion from the federal officers to the Victorian bureaucrats that it could be a get-around if Victoria was prepared to sponsor an individual visa application from the tennis player.
No, I mean, the Border Force has already rejected that scuttlebutt. As I understand it. there was no inquiries being made about support for a visa application, I'm advised. There was inquiries being made about whether quarantine was going to be waived. And to my knowledge, I still don't know whether the Victorian government were proposing to waive quarantine. I'm not making any comment on that. And that wasn't the basis of any decisions taken. And in relation to any advice he may have received from Tennis Australia, well, I'm releasing the letter. I mean, the letter makes very clear that it was written back to Tennis Australia in November. I'll read it out to you. People must be fully vaccinated as defined by the ATAGI to gain quarantine-free entry into Australia. This means that people who do not meet the ATAGI definition of fully vaccinated will not be approved for quarantine-free entry, regardless of whether they have received foreign vaccine exemptions. In relation to the specific questions that were raised by Tennis Australia, this is from the Minister for Health, I can confirm that people who contracted COVID-19 within the past 6 months and seek to enter Australia from overseas and have not received 2 doses of a TGA-approved or TGA-recognised vaccine are not considered fully vaccinated. Now, that was the clear advice given by the Minister for Health to Tennis Australia, and that letter is dated at the end of November of last year. So this is what I make the point to travellers. Whatever people might tell you, what matters is what you are responsible for when you arrive at the border.